Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune in to Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. So, this is pretty much a video that I Too Raw for TV did during the weekend, but I really wanted to touch about this a little bit more though, and this is going to touch upon one of the best small forwards and one of the most prolific scorers, in the history of the game, and we're talking about AD. Nope, not Anthony Davis, but Adrian Dantley. And when you look at Adrian Dantley's career, he is without a doubt one of the most, prolific and one of the most efficient scorers that you'll ever find in the history of basketball. Standing at 6 feet and 5 inches and weighing only at 208 pounds and 208 pounds, this was the kind of guy that revolutionized his game by effectively working inside in the post and utilizing the ability to create contact to get to the foul line. And as a result, he would have unbelievable scoring seasons throughout his entire career. But we're going to get into that in about a couple of minutes here. Now, when he was basically born in D.C., he was immediately attracted to basketball. And when he basically went to DeMatha Catholic High School in Hayesville, Maryland, um, I learned that he pretty much played, center during his 3 years during his time there, which really helped out in his development of his post game. Um, when he was playing in those 3 years there, he won at least 57 games when he was in high school. Now, when he was recruited to Notre Dame from 73 to 76, he was a consensus first team All American for two of those seasons. Okay, and for his career, he averaged basically 25.8 points per game and shot 80% from the foul line and shot at least 56% from the field. Okay. And when he was playing in Notre Dame, when he was a freshman there, he played an important role for one of the biggest upsets in college basketball history. With Notre Dame, they were basically 10-1 underdogs against UCLA, which at the time held an 88-game winning streak, which would comprise of legendary coach John Wooden, featuring guys like Bill Walton, Jamal Wilkes, and Dave Meyer. And during that game, I think that Adrian Dantley scored 38 or maybe 40 points in that game. I am not sure specifically. I couldn't find that out. But he played a major role in that upset and ending UCLA's long winning streak. Now, they did ended up winning the title. That actually, it was no, it was in 74. No, actually, it was in 74 when they lost to NC State in the semifinals. But that pretty much ended their winning streak. And later on that season, UCLA went on to lose in the semifinals against North Carolina State. But during those years there, he averaged 34 points per game when he was a sophomore in 74-75. And then when he was a junior, he pretty much averaged 28.6 points per game. And so when he basically left college after 3 years, he he finished his career second all time in career scoring with 2,223 points, and he holds the school record for free throws made with 615 made free throws out of 669 free throw attempts, which is also still a school record. And so he also was the leading scorer of the 1976 USA Olympic team that pretty much captured the gold medal in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So he turned pro back in 1976, right, and was drafted by the Buffalo Braves. And he did an unbelievable job in Buffalo when he became the third player in 5 years to basically receive the NBA Rookie of the Year award, along with Bob McAdoo and I think one other player. I'm not sure which one it was, but by that time, the Buffalo Braves were pretty much going through a lot of financial, problems along the way. Um, by the end of that season of his rookie year, and also one more season ahead, that Buffalo Braves team ended up moving to San Diego and becoming the San Diego Braves, and then later on becoming the San Diego Clippers, and ended up moving to Los Angeles after that. But he was pretty much traded to the Indiana Pacers. All right, and he became the first player to win Rookie of the Year and immediately, you know, get traded. He only played 23 games there, but in the course of those 23 games he played at Indiana, he averaged 26 and a half points per game. But then he ended up being traded to the LA Lakers, and he didn't do too bad in LA for the time that he stayed there, but it was a bit of a conflicting kind of situation because he was a small forward. He was a hybrid type of player that needed the ball to effectively score. And since they had another small forward in Jamal Wilkes, in their lineup, the Lakers pretty much figured out that they didn't need Adrian Dantley as much as they needed more Jamal Wilkes. So therefore, you know, he ended up being traded to the Utah Jazz for basically Spencer Haywood. It was pretty much at that time with the Jazz where he pretty much peaked in his game as perhaps one of the most top prolific scorers in the NBA. And this is what after the Pete Maravich era concluded. So during that time with the Jazz, he basically led the league in scoring twice in both 81 and 84. He also averaged 30 points per game in each of those seasons between 81 and 84. And even though he missed 60 games in 83 after basically tearing up ligaments in his right hands, in those 7 years with the Jazz, he basically made the All-Star team 6 times. He was selected to 2 second team NBA All NBA honors, and he was basically included top 4 or top 3 or top 4 of the top 7 spots in field goal and basically shooting percentages for players that average basically 30 points per game. So I think there was at that time for a 4 year stretch where he basically, averaged 30 points per game. And it's just a mind boggling to see how a guy basically weighing in basically going in at 6'5" that could probably drop 30 points per game in a 4 year stretch. His ability to work inside of the paint and get guys to commit off of pump fakes and use it in his post moves was basically his bread and butter. And his ability to draw contact and get to the free throw line was also made him special. And I think in that 81 season, he actually had more free throw attempts made than field goal percentages made when he basically averaged 30.7 points per game, leading the NBA in scoring. And during those years in 81 and 84, he was basically a two-time scoring champion. Okay. And he was a player that that basically was a guy that when he was working inside the post, you just could not stop him. There were not many players could stop Adrian Dantley at that time when he was working inside the paint. But even with his individual success that time with the Jazz, unfortunately, the team, wasn't improving as much as they wanted to improve. Basically, Harold what's the what's that point guard's name at that time for the Jazz? Check it out real quick. With Ricky Green as his point guard, unfortunately, the Utah Jazz didn't, elevate in that tough Western Conference during that time, and there was a perception about Adrian Dantley that was starting to grow among a lot of critics that he pretty much didn't play that much defense, and he really wasn't a guy that could trust upon to to stay in the games stay late in the games to make critical defensive stops. Now, let me say this about this, okay? In Adrian Dantley's defense, all right, he wasn't a kind of you know freakish athletic guy like you say about a Michael Jordan who took a pride of himself about dropping 40 or 50 points a game on your head and going back on the other end and basically trying to shut you down. That was not his game, okay? He was basically a hybrid scorer that basically preserved himself to really do his job on the offensive end. And you think about it, when you're basically the top guy, the go-to guy to basically score, 30 points a night, I mean, you have to find a way to preserve your energy to get those buckets that the team needs desperately because they don't have enough other offensive firepower from other sources. So I would not go deep into that kind of criticism. Now, his individual defense was not the best, But let's be real here. How many players that you could pretty much say that could basically was the best two-way player? Bird was not a great two-way player. I mean, his defense was not as superb either. Neither was Magic Johnson's. The only person you could pretty much say was Michael Jordan and maybe some on Dominique, but there were times where Dominique could get scored on too. So I found that criticism to be very unfair, and I'm glad Raw, expanded more on that. But like I said, the Jazz did not win and did not advance, along in the playoffs. And Frank Layden, who was the coach at the time, you know, really didn't get along too well with Danley as much because they were not winning as progressively as they would. And between the years of 84 and 85, saw their rivals of John Stockton and Karl Malone. And since the organization saw much more of a better future with those two other Hall of Famers, he ended up being traded after the 85-86 season to the Detroit Pistons. And just like what Ross said, the acquisitions of Adrian Dantley and the draft picks of John Sally, Dennis Rodman is what got the Pistons over and become title contenders. It was not all on Isaiah Thomas. I'm getting tired of people pretty much saying that, Isaiah Thomas did that all by himself. Really? Let's be real here. The Pistons before Adrian Dantley couldn't even get past the second round. All right. Isaiah Thomas, who was the only Lone Star at the time before Dumars and before Lambier, didn't even make the playoffs. So let's pump the brakes down a bit. Adrian Dantley made that Pistons team into a title contender. Without Adrian Dantley on the team, they don't beat the Celtics. All right. And we got to remember this too. In that famous 87 Eastern Conference Finals between Detroit and Boston, that was perhaps one of the all-time greatest series during the 80s, okay? Remember, in that Game 7, Adrian Dantley was diving for a loose ball, all right? He was diving for a loose ball and bumped heads with Vinnie Johnson, and he was knocked out unconscious, all right? He was knocked out unconscious and basically was forced out of the game on a stretcher. If Adrian Dantley did not hurt himself in that Game 7, there's a good chance that the Pistons may have beaten the Celtics in that Game 7. But you have to also reflect back to Game 5 when basically Isaiah Thomas made the arrogant pass to pass to Bill Lambier, in which Bird obviously read it all the way, stole the ball, and gave the ball to Vinnie Johnson for the game-winning layup. That was the major turning point of that series. Now, by next year in 88, the Pistons got better. They learned their lesson and pretty much beat the aging Celtics in the 88 Eastern Conference Finals and advanced to the NBA Finals. And, Adrian Dantley, did his part, to help the Pistons try to win their first championship. But if it wasn't for that horrible call on Bill Lambier in Game 6, I think that the Pistons would have won their first championship, then and there. Even though Isaiah Thomas had a heroic performance in that Game 6, he didn't have the best, overall series for everyone else's accounts. Okay, so let's calm that down when we talk about this. Okay, when you look back at the '88 series, the Pistons were led by Adrian Dantley. He averaged 21.3 points per game, and Isaiah Thomas averaged 19.7. So they were pretty much, taking turns of the scoring load. All right, and yes, Isaiah Thomas injured that ankle and had that great performance in Game 6, but he was pretty much a non-factor in Game 7 because that ankle was just too much for them to overcome. You know what I'm saying? And then they ended up losing Game 7, and the Lakers went on to win back-to-back NBA titles that year. Now, we're going to advance to about the 88-89 season, okay? Now, it was pretty much said that, Adrian Dantley was pretty much a guy that was a kind of, a selfish player, and was the kind of guy that he didn't give you the answers that you kind of wanted and kind of rub people off the wrong way. And this is one of the most slickest things that Isaiah Thomas has ever done. And I don't care what they said in that Pistons 30 for 30 documentary on ESPN. I don't care what they say. I believe that Isaiah Thomas went to management and pretty much said, listen, we need to get rid of Adrian Dantley because we don't like Adrian Dantley. We don't want him around here anymore. And through all the truth that Isaiah Thomas tells a lot of times, there are certain instances where Isaiah Thomas can come across as basically full of crap on some of the things that he talks about. And this is one of them, all right? Because Adrian Dantley was the type of person that was not going to bend over backwards for Isaiah Thomas. He was not going to kiss Isaiah Thomas's feet at any given point, all right? He was basically another alpha male that was basically his own, that basically was a guy that spoke his own mind and wasn't going to capitulate to the demands of Isaiah Thomas. That's what I think. That's what happened. That's what kind of precipitated the Pistons trading Adrian Dantley to the Mavericks for Mark Aguirre. Now, don't mistake me. Now, don't get me wrong. I did a video about Mark Aguirre, about how great of a scorer he was with the Dallas Mavericks. But let's make something very, very clear here. The only reason why that trade was made was through the approval of Isaiah Thomas's blessing, because Isaiah Thomas does a lot of these political talkings, rumors behind the scenes. Some of the stuff that LeBron James is notoriously famous for even today. But the way I viewed Isaiah Thomas is that he was a slick street talking politician that would say some good things to your face, but then talk some stuff behind your back. And I firmly believe that what was going on during that 88-89 season, and why Adrian Dantley does not like Isaiah Thomas too much. I mean, he respects him as a player, but not as a person. So after after he spent about a year with the Mavericks, all right, he pretty much wrapped up 2 more seasons with the Mavericks and then spent 1 more year with Milwaukee before ultimately hanging up his career. And the fact that it took him about at least 15 years for him to get to the Hall of Fame is beyond ridiculous. This guy, for for almost an entire decade, was one of the five, top 10 greatest best scorers in the game. Okay, the way that he dissecting defenses back then, it was just unbelievable, especially for a guy that was basically coming in at 6'5", weighing at 208 pounds, and for him just average for about a 4 year stretch 30 points per game in the early 80s. I mean, it's just unheard of. It was just amazing production. And so he pretty much was a kind of guy that you could trust upon to get you a guaranteed bucket every single time. So by the time his career pretty much ended, he basically was an assistant coach under George Karl for 8 of those seasons, and he briefly served as the coach of the Nuggets during that 2010 season when George Karl was going through his cancer treatment. And during his retirement too, he's even volunteered to work as a street patrol person there too, and also he's worked as a referee for high school and recreational leagues in the DC area. And I've heard people that pretty much talked about, Adrian Dantley is broke. He's probably doing this job because he's not making money right now. Let's make something very, very clear here, okay? A lot of these NBA players have pensions that they pretty much are saved up when their careers is over. I don't think for a second that Adrian Dantley, is doing this for the money. He just probably was doing it because that's probably he was wanting to do something, and he doesn't really care what you think. He's the kind of person that is not going to care what you feel about him. He doesn't care about what you think. He just pretty much tells you how it is, and he makes his own decisions based on what he wants to do. And he's not going to capitulate to the demands of other people, which also included, once again, Isaiah Thomas. That's why things went down south in Detroit. So this was a kind of player that, if you ask me who does he remind me of, he was basically a hybrid type of scorer. He was basically a mixture of, you could say, a James Harden or a Carmelo Anthony. Those kind of players that pretty much was a guy that can work inside the paint. He has an excellent mid-range jump shot and can get to the free throw line, very efficiently. And so I'm glad that he's basically in the Hall of Fame, and he's pretty much done everything that he's ever did throughout his entire basketball career. But he was robbed of an NBA championship. You know what I'm saying? He was just robbed of an NBA title when they basically took that opportunity away when they traded him to Dallas. All right. If Adrian Dantley does not come to Detroit and change that franchise around, they don't become title contenders. You could You can miss me with all of the Isaiah Thomas was still the star, was the main guy. Yeah, I'm sure he was. He was the captain. But let's make something very, very clear here. Isaiah Thomas didn't have much success in the postseason before Adrian Dantley, John Sally, and Dennis Rodman came. Those guys helped propel the Pistons to get over the hump and become title contenders. All right. If Adrian Dantley is not part of that team, they don't make the NBA Finals. They don't get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And they've just become another good playoff team, but not a title contender. So you need to give more respect and much more recognition to what he was able to do during his time in Detroit. And I think that they should probably do himself a favor and to retire his number 45 jersey up in the Raptors in Detroit. Just off of the fact that what he was able to do during those 2.5 seasons in Detroit, he was able to help that team become a title contender. And once again, if it wasn't for that phantom call, he probably would be holding a championship ring at this particular point in time. But yeah, that's just pretty much my perspective about how I remembered Adrian Dantley. And I hope that a lot of young basketball players can take the opportunity and take some time to just go look over their phones and check out some highlights of Adrian Dantley, because this guy, when he was on his game, you could not stop him. You know what I'm saying? The post moves, his ability to get to the free throw line, the excellent mid-range jumper. I mean, this guy was a prime time scoring machine. And because of the fact that the NBA prioritizes a three-point shot a little bit more frequently, I'm sure he would have added a little bit more three-point shooting into his game. But that's not what he was. But that's not what his game was basically was basically founded on. That's just pretty much how I kind of saw his game, as a hybrid low post scorer that could score with the best of them. That's how I remember Adrian Dantley. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section.